Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Mine. My name is Vic Shy, and this is the Scare Score, where I break down horror movies and rate them on how scary I think they are. In today's episode, I'll be taking a look at one of the craziest films I've seen in a long time, the 2021 Taiwanese horror film, The Sadness. The film tells the story of a young couple attempting to reunite with one another during a viral outbreak that has turned a majority of the population into brutal homicidal maniacs. The film was written and directed by Rob Jabaz in his directorial debut. The Sadness is an absolutely brutal and violent film, and this being YouTube, I can't even show a fraction of what happens in this movie. However, I'll be doing my best to break down the events that take place throughout the film and award a scare score at the end of the video based on how effective the scares are or attempt to be. If you enjoy this video, make sure to click the like button as it really helps out the channel and I would truly appreciate it. The Sadness is one of the goriest and most violent films I have seen in quite some time. But how scary is it? Sit back and relax and join me as we explore The Sadness and tally up the scare score. Our movie begins by introducing us to our two main characters, young couple Jim and Kat. She gets upset with Jim because he accepted a job the week they're supposed to go on vacation. Don't worry, Kat, a cancelled vacation is about to become the least of your problems. While eating a deliciously plump-looking bao, Jim watches a video of a doctor talking about the Alvin virus. He says the virus is very dangerous and that people should take it seriously. Jim goes out to the balcony and sees an old lady creepily standing on a rooftop. Jim is greeted by his neighbor Mr. Lin, who says he has a slight cold but doesn't want to go see a doctor. Now, there is definitely some commentary in this film meant to reflect certain real-life happenings, if you will. But y'all know me, I'm simply here for the entertainment value and to talk about horror movies, so I won't dive into all that. Jim gives Kat a ride to work and they see a disturbing police scene on the side of the road. The police are detaining an irate man who presumably murdered the person on the stretcher. Jim drops Kat off at the subway station and the two lovers part ways. On his way back, Jim notices the police car still parked on the side of the road with the doors wide open but without any officers. This is a pretty ominous scene that sends chills down your spine and the feeling that something is terribly wrong. He goes to a local restaurant for some coffee where all hell finally breaks loose. The lady from the rooftop walks in and spits in the face of another customer. She then grabs the fryer and pours hot oil all over the worker's face. As his face melts, she tears pieces off of it before Jim stops her. The customer whose face was spit on quickly becomes infected and starts brutally stabbing his friend. The lady approaches Jim in the street but is suddenly struck by a car being driven by another infected man. He manages to escape into his apartment and heads straight to the fridge to down a can of beer like the Texas rattlesnake. He tries turning on the news, but all the channels have been taken over by an emergency message, all except for a weird cartoon starring a big bad wolf. One of the infected comes over the local PA and broadcasts a pretty disturbing message, showing that the infected have swiftly taken over the immediate area. Jim tries texting Kat to warn her about the situation and is suddenly attacked by an infected Mr. Lin armed with hedge trimmers. As we can see with Mr. Lin, the infected have completely black irises and redness around their eyes. They are driven by extreme violence and sex but seem completely aware of their actions. They are brutal and relentless, which makes them pretty terrifying. Mr. Lin chops off 2 of Jim's fingers before getting knocked out with a toaster. Jim walks outside and witnesses a group of infected torturing an innocent man. Jim gets on his bike and manages to narrowly escape a large group of infected. On the subway, a businessman attempts to have a conversation with Kat, but she rejects him. He goes on a small rant about women and Kat moves away from him. An infected makes his way onto the train and begins stabbing several people. He stabs a man in the neck, which splatters a ton of blood onto the train and the other passengers. The infected man is subdued by 2 men as the other passengers watch in shock. Several other people suddenly become infected and start biting the other passengers. The businessman businessman also becomes infected and stabs a woman in the eye with his umbrella. Absolute chaos ensues inside the train as people are stabbed, beaten, eaten alive, and even sexually assaulted. Kat and the injured woman manage to escape the train but are pursued by the businessman. We learn that the woman's name is Molly, and the pair try to run out of the subway to the nearest hospital. The businessman appears and quickly runs after them. They run into a pretty random guy who tries to defend them. He manages to get a punch in, but the businessman grabs onto him and bites off his nose. The businessman grabs a fireman's axe and kills the man. They see a man outside staring at them and call out for help. The gate to the outside starts to shut and they manage to narrowly escape the businessman. He says that the police ordered him to close the gate and he gets punched by Molly for his trouble. They run towards the hospital as the businessman reaches the gate. As Jim rides through the streets, he sees several dead and mutilated people that fell victim to the infected. The scene is pretty disturbing with lots of blood and gore and a specific shot of a stroller that forces us to fill in the blanks. He patches up his hand with duct tape and arms himself with a sickle. He hears a man shouting in the distance and finds him being beaten and tortured by a group of infected. Jim manages to fight them off but realizes that the victim is now infected and was enjoying his torture. Kat and Molly make it to the hospital where Molly gets treated for her injuries. Molly thanks Kat for saving her life and says that she won't forget it. Kat uses the man's phone to text Jim, letting him know that she's at the hospital. The government then broadcasts a public announcement regarding the viral outbreak. The president says that this is the biggest challenge in the country's history, making it unknown if the outbreak has spread to the rest of the world. The top general states that 15 to 20% of the population has become infected. The general himself becomes infected and kills the president using a grenade before the broadcast cuts off. Now, I can't show the kill, but it looks a little something like this. The people in the hospital start to argue with one another, which leads to a fight. The man pulls on Kat's hair, demanding his phone back, and she elbows him in the face. As the patients freak out, the police block the entrance to the hospital and the businessman arrives. He swings his axe through the glass door and kills the male officer. Several infected make their way inside the hospital and attack the patients. The female officer gets tackled to the ground and sexually assaulted. The man proceeds to run away and hide underneath a hospital bed in the hallway. The businessman walks into the hallway and finds Molly immobilized in a wheelchair. In one of the film's most disturbing scenes, he sexually assaults her in the worst way imaginable. I'm going to describe this using 2 words: eye socket. Jim receives Kat's messages and the couple finally speak to one another ever since the outbreak started. Jim tells her to find a place to hide and that he will come for her. During the conversation, Jim sees a mannequin's head in the water. He starts to hallucinate and imagines the head coming to life. This scene was absolutely terrifying and it didn't have a single drop of blood. It really caught me off guard and it was very well executed. In a viral outbreak movie staple, Jim looks over the city where we see smoke and hear the chaos happening down below. Back in the hospital, the man leaves his hiding spot and sees something truly disturbing, depending on who you ask. He witnesses 4 infected getting a little steamy in the middle of the hallway covered in blood. I'm sure as some of you can tell, I'm not only awarding points for being scary, but for being downright disturbing. The man sneaks past the bloody orgy into another room and finds a now infected Molly feasting on someone's brain. The man is grabbed by a group of infected and is killed by Molly using a surgical saw. Kat once again comes across the relentless businessman who stops 2 other infected from going after her, telling them that she belongs to him. Kat is able to sneak up on the businessman and spray him with a fire extinguisher. She hits him over the head with it a few times before he tells her that she is just like him. He says that she is violent and depraved before she proceeds to completely bash his face in with the extinguisher. This is a really great scene with some awesome gore, but what truly makes this scene great is the music. A metal door suddenly opens and she is rescued by a doctor wearing a fully protective bodysuit. He holds her at gunpoint and tells her to handcuff herself to the shower. He says that she is covered in contaminated tissue and sprays her down with a chemical disinfectant. He reveals his face and we see that he is the same doctor from the beginning of the film. Jim arrives at the hospital and goes looking for Kat. The doctor believes that since Kat isn't showing symptoms of infection, that she may have a natural immunity to the Alvin virus, otherwise known as thick plot armor. He says that he made his gun from a 3D printer, feeling that he may need it for this exact situation. He tried telling people about the virus for years, but no one would take him seriously. He says that the virus connects the areas of the brain that regulate aggression and sexual drive. He says that the infected know exactly what they're doing but are unable to resist doing it.
最可怕的行为。
You okay there, Doc? Kat throws her clothes in the trash and discovers an infected baby inside of it. The doctor quickly injects Kat with a strand of the Alvin virus and cuffs her back to the shower. He says that if she is not immune, she will start showing symptoms soon. He tells her that a helicopter is coming to pick them up and that Kat may be the key to developing a vaccine. He says that when he got to the maternity ward, the staff was gone and there were 8 abandoned babies. He injected all the infants with the virus to see if any of them were immune. He believes that what he did was better than if an infected would have found them. Kat manages to unlock the phone to message Jim her location and warn him about the doctor. The doctor receives a message that the helicopter is 5 minutes away and leaves the room with Kat. He does a pretty good job at trying to sneak around but leaves his foot exposed at the corner. An infected chops off his toes with the axe, but the doc manages to shoot him in the head. Another infected charges at him and throws up all over his open wound before also getting shot in the head. Kat helps escort the doctor towards the rooftop and the pair finally come across Jim.
跟你说，今天一定会找到你的。
It seems that Jim left his plot armor at the apartment this morning because after all of the struggle of looking for Kat, Jim was unfortunately unable to avoid getting infected. He charges at them and the doctor shoots him in the neck. He attempts to shoot him a second time, but the 3D printed gun blows up in his hands. Kat quickly grabs the roof keys off the doctor and Jim stabs him in the neck with the sickle. Kat manages to open the gate to the rooftop and locks herself in before Jim can reach her. He tells her that being infected feels wonderful and that he finally has a purpose in life. He then says that he came all this way to find her and brutally kill her. Though he is clearly no longer himself, the things he is saying are clearly breaking her heart. Jim tells Kat that he loves her and she starts laughing hysterically, which was truly heartbreaking. In the film's final scene, Kat runs out onto the rooftop and we hear the helicopter right outside. The door shuts behind her and we hear the sound of multiple gunshots accompanied by a scream. While we don't see exactly what happened, it's highly likely that Kat was shot to death by the helicopter crew who were only there to pick up the doctor. The final shot of the film is of the infected Jim mindlessly staring into the camera with a grin on his face as the movie ends. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was The Sadness. Director Rob Jabaz stated that he actually named the movie The Sadness based off of the finale, and I can see why. Although I feel that I just didn't care enough for our main characters for the ending to be truly impactful. While I did feel for the situation they found themselves in, I think that the movie could have benefited from a slightly longer runtime to develop their characters a bit further. The Sadness was an absolutely brutal movie filled with gore and disturbing imagery. The film is definitely not for the faint of heart or the squeamish. While a majority of the scares did rely on said gore and disturbing imagery, there were more than enough tense moments filled throughout to help The Sadness earn a good scare score of 65%. The scariest scene in the film is ironically one that shows zero gore. It's the scene where Jim hallucinates about the mannequin head in the water coming to life. The mannequin head on its own was pretty creepy, but once it came to life and started viciously licking the air, I immediately contacted my therapist. The scare was unexpected and so well executed, which made it all the more disturbing. The Sadness isn't the scariest film you'll ever see, but it should more than satisfy those looking for a bloody and disturbing hour and a half. The director himself has said that this isn't a zombie movie, but it is definitely a great addition to the viral outbreak movie genre. While I wasn't a big fan of the main characters, the businessman was a truly great villain and was the standout character of this film for sure. But as always, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you all for tuning in, and I cannot wait to see y'all right back here in the Horror Mine. Y'all stick around.